There are some stories that, well, they just get under your skin. They don't leave you. They're not simple stories with heroes and villains. They're messy. They're about the gray spaces, about the debts we inherit and the ghosts we can't outrun. This is one of those stories. I want you to picture this. It's Texas, 1869, 4 years after Appomattox, 4 years after the Civil War supposedly ended. We all read the history books. We know the 13th Amendment passed. Slavery was abolished. The Union was preserved. But history books, they leave out the smell. They leave out the desperation. On the ground, in the shadows of Reconstruction, the old world was still kicking. And in these hidden barns, far from the eyes of the law, the auctions continued. The sound of a chain, the crack of a whip, then silence. Under a sun that just bakes the sin into the dirt, a young girl stands on a wooden platform. She's 17, barefoot. Her wrists are raw from rusted iron. The crowd, they stare at her like she's livestock. The auctioneer, he grins, sweat running down his neck. Next one, he barks, 17. No husband, no family. Been sold 3 times already. He pauses, then adds like it's a defect. Won't talk, won't work. $5 to start. In a time when folks valued a strong back for farm labor, a silent, broken girl like her, she was useless. Too shattered by the war's aftermath to fetch more than a few coins. No one speaks. A man in the front spits in the dirt. Not worth a single dime. The girl's name is Lena Cartwright. She just stares at the ground. She stopped crying long ago. Crying never changed anything out here. Then a voice. Calm, deep, steady. I'll pay 20. Heads turn. At the back of the crowd, a man in a faded brown coat stands with a handful of crumpled bills. His name is Grant McCade, 56 years old, gray stubble on his jaw, a man who looks like he hasn't smiled in a decade. The auctioneer blinks. 20? You sure, mister? Grant just nods once. The gavel slams down. Sold. Lena doesn't move. She doesn't even look at him. Grant steps closer, pulling off his hat. And when he sees her face clearly, when his eyes drift down to her wrist as he reaches for her, his heart stops. That scar, a small, perfect crescent on her wrist. He remembers that scar. He remembers 8 years ago. A little girl hiding behind her father's leg, asking him if the wound from the splintered fence post would leave a mark. He remembers wrapping that wound himself. He remembers telling her, no. He remembers lying. The auctioneer shoves Lena forward. Grant catches her. Her skin is burning hot. She looks up at him for the first time, her eyes green but hollow. Completely empty. He whispers her name, Lena. Her expression doesn't change. Maybe a flicker, a half-buried memory, but she pushes it down. Folks in her shoes learn fast not to trust old faces. She doesn't remember him. Or maybe she does and wishes she didn't. Grant pays the man his last coins and walks away with the girl who hadn't spoken in years. The dirt road stretches out under a merciless sky. Lena walks a few steps behind him. her chains clinking softly, and every single clink, 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 sounds to Grant like a coin dropping into a collection plate for a debt he can never, ever repay. He doesn't know if she'll ever understand why he did this. Maybe she never will. But as the barn door slams shut behind him, he feels the past breathing down his neck. 8 years ago, his father's greed had condemned the Cartwright family. And now, the last piece of that family, silent, broken, and alive, walks right behind him. Huh? How do you ask forgiveness from someone who doesn't even know who you are? The road stretches for miles. Right after they leave the barn, Grant stops the horses. He pulls a key from his pocket and unlocks her chains. He says, "No one should wear these in a free country," but the words sound hollow. The war was over. Promises had been made, and here they were. He could feel her fear. It was like heat rolling off her. Every time he looked back, she stared at the ground, never at him. They stopped near a big oak tree. Its shade is the only cool spot for miles. Grant climbs down, ties the horses, and pulls a small canteen from his saddlebag. He walks over, careful, slow, like you'd approach a spooked animal. "Here," he says softly. She hesitates. She watches him, her eyes narrowing, sizing him up. Have you ever seen someone who's been shown kindness so many times only for it to be a trap? That's her. She's seen too many false kindnesses. Finally, she reaches for it, her fingers trembling. She grips the canteen tight. She takes one sip, wipes her mouth, and then looks straight at him. And for the first time, she speaks. Her voice, it's quiet, but it's sharp enough to cut bone. "Guess you got what you paid for," she says. "Do what you want."
Man, those words, they hang in the air. They sting worse than a bullet. Grant freezes. He kneels down slowly, making sure she can see his hands are empty. "I didn't buy you to own you," he says. His voice is rough. I just didn't want to see them sell you again." She lets out a laugh. It's not a real laugh. It's this short, dry, bitter sound. "You think that makes it better?" He doesn't answer. What answer is there? In the eyes of the law, in her eyes, he bought her. The transaction is done. They just sit there in the heat, the silence stretching. "I knew your family," he says finally. "Your father, he was a good man. I should have done more when they came for him." Lena turns her face away. Her voice goes flat. Everybody says that after it's too late.
She's right. She's absolutely right. Talk is the cheapest thing in the world. He knows it, and he knows he earned every single ounce of her anger. He puts his hat back on and follows. He just wonders how many miles it will take before she stops seeing him as the enemy, or if she ever will. By the time they reach his ranch, the sun is sliding behind the hills. The land is quiet, empty. Grant unties the horses, hands Lena a crust of bread, and just points to the small cabin. "Inside," he says. She hesitates, eyes darting, single bed, cold stove. Then she steps in, slow, careful, like a stray dog testing if the floor will hold. For a few days, the ranch stays silent. This isn't an awkward silence. This is a heavy silence. This is the silence of trauma. Lena works without a word. She feeds the horses, hauls water, scrubs the floor until her hands crack. Grant fixes fences, mends the roof. He tries not to watch her too closely. They just exist. Two ghosts sharing the same ground, suffocating on everything they can't say. But out here, in this part of the country, silence never lasts long. On the third day, riders. Grant sees the dust first, then the glint of a badge catching the sunlight. Sheriff Dalton, the same man who had once called himself protector of justice, the same man who led the soldiers to burn the Cartwright farm to ash. Dalton dismounts, slow, smirking. Well, if it ain't Grant McCade. His eyes slide past Grant, and they land on Lena, standing behind the fence. He squints, and his eyes fix on the scar, the one from that fateful night, and his smirk fades, just for a split second. Old secrets, they don't stay buried easy in these parts. Now that's a face I thought I'd never see again, Dalton says. Lena freezes, her knuckles whiten on the wooden rail. Grant steps between them. You had your look. Dalton laughs. You buying lost girls now, Grant? What, is she here to keep you warm at night? Grant doesn't flinch, but the air, it just changes. It's that kind of silence that comes right before a gunshot. I paid for her freedom, Grant says, his voice low and steady. Not her body. Dalton takes a slow step forward. His hand rests on the gun at his hip. Well, that's mighty noble of you. But you see, I remember that name, Cartwright. He looks at Lena. Your daddy was a traitor. It was the same old lie, the lie he had spun 8 years ago to justify the raid. This is how it happened back then. In the chaos after Appomattox, you wanted land, you just called the owner a traitor to the Union, and you took it. You burned their home, you scattered their family, and you filed a claim. Simple as that. Lena's breath hitches. She grips the rail, her mind flashing back to the flames, wanting to spit the truth at him, but knowing that silence is what had kept her alive this long. Grant's jaw tightens. He's under my protection, he says. Dalton chuckles. Then he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a single bullet. He places it on the fence post, right between them. A reminder, Grant, he says softly. Some ghosts don't stay buried. They ride off. The dust they leave behind feels heavier than before. Lena picks up the bullet. She turns it in her hand. Who was that? She asks quietly. Grant doesn't answer. Not yet. He just looks out toward the fading sun, the memory of fire and screams still burning in his mind. Because he knew this wasn't over. And when Dalton came back, blood would follow. That night, the wind blew harder than usual, the kind of wind that carries the smell of rain and old memories. Grant sat by the small fire in the cabin. Lena sat across from him, silent as ever. Neither had spoken since Dalton's visit. But silence, after a shock like that, silence has a way of forcing the truth out. After a long time, Lena reaches into her pocket. She places something on the table. A small silver pocket watch, old and worn. The initials RC, faintly carved on its back. She pushes it toward him. Recognize it? She asks. His hand freezes. He does. Robert Cartwright. Her father. I found it, she says, her voice barely a whisper. In a bag left behind after the raid. I kept it. 8 years. Hiding it. Every time they sold me, I made sure no one ever touched it. It was the last thing Paul gave me. She looks up at him. Her eyes are sharp, but they're wet. You knew him, didn't you? Grant swallows. His voice comes out rough. I did. Lena leans forward. Then tell me the truth. What really happened that night?
This is it. The reckoning. Grant stares at the flames. They flicker. They twist, like ghosts dancing. He finally speaks, each word slow, heavy, weighed down by 8 years of guilt. "My father," he says, "my father sold out your family for their land." He tells her everything. He tells her he was just a young man, but he overheard his father telling the soldiers, telling Dalton. He tells her he rode to warn him. "I rode as fast as I could, Lena, but it was too late. Everything was burning." He looks down at his hands. "I was a coward. I watched from the trees. I lived, and they didn't." Lena says nothing. She just reaches for the watch, closes her hand around it, her knuckles white. "You think telling me this makes it better?" she asks. "No," he says softly, "it doesn't. But you deserve to know who you're standing next to." For a long time, they just sit there, the fire hissing between them. Outside, thunder rolls over the hills, like the earth remembering what they tried to forget. Lena finally speaks again. Her voice is almost a whisper. "If your father did all that, why are you the one carrying the guilt?" It's the most important question she could ask. He could blame his father. He could blame the war. He could blame Dalton. But he doesn't. Grant looks up. His eyes are tired, but they are steady. "'Cause I was there," he says. "'Cause I did nothing. And because I'm still breathing when they're not."
The fire cracks once more. Lena just looks at him. And for the first time since he met her anger seems to falter. Not gone, just cracked, like something inside her was trying to understand. But before she can speak, a sound breaks through the storm outside. Hooves, fast, close. Grant reaches for his gun, because sometimes the past doesn't knock twice. But the sound fades. It was just the storm, just the wind. Grant stands by the door for a long time, gun still in hand. Lena sits by the hearth, the silver watch still clutched tight. The silence is different now. Not cold, not angry, just heavy, with everything that had finally been said. When morning came, the storm was gone. The sky was washed clean, soft light spilling over the ranch. Grant went out to fix a section of fence the storm had broken, his hands steady, his back aching. He didn't hear Lena at first, not until she spoke right behind him. "You're doing it wrong." Her tone, it was dry, almost teasing. He turns. She's holding a hammer. Her hair is messy, her dress still damp. Without another word, she comes over and starts helping him. They work side by side for hours. No talking, just the sound of wood and wind. And somehow, in that quiet rhythm, something began to change. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something that felt close to peace. Later that evening, Grant builds 2 small wooden crosses. He builds them near the fence line. He carves the names by hand. One for Robert Cartwright, and one simply marked family. When Lena sees it, her eyes filled with the tears she had held back for 8 long years. She kneels beside the graves. She traces the letters with her fingertips. Then she stands, walks up to him, and places the watch back into his hand. "I think it's time you keep it," she says. He shakes his head. "No, it belongs to them."
She smiles, the small, tired smile, but real. Then let it stay here. She places the watch on the cross of her father. That night, she doesn't sleep in the corner by the door. She sits by the window, and Grant, sitting across the room, finally feels like he can breathe again. Days turned into weeks. Lena stayed. She mended clothes. She planted seeds. She handed him a plank when he stumbled in the mud one day. Small acts, building trust, like families all across the country rebuilding after the war. Little by little, the ghosts that haunted that ranch, they began to fade. Maybe forgiveness doesn't come in a single moment. Maybe it's not a word you say. Maybe it just grows. The way grass pushes through burned soil, quiet and slow. And maybe that's what healing really is.